Hi everyone, my name is Ashika Raman, and my group members are Amanda Dean, Danica Rodriguez, Ranveer Gill, Avita Prasad, and Megan Simpson. We are doing a presentation on an eating disorder called Anorexia Nervosa, otherwise known as simply anorexia. Here's the overview for our presentation. In the first section, we'll be describing the significance of anorexia. Next, we'll be discussing the characteristics, signs, and symptoms of this disorder. This will also involve a definition of anorexia. In the third section, we'll describe the causes and risk factors of anorexia. We'll then move on to describing a non-medication intervention for treating this disorder. The section will include information from a study that evaluated the effectiveness of this treatment. In addition, we'll be going over a critique of the study. Finally, we will end off our presentation with a discussion of how anorexia was portrayed in a movie that was released in 2017 called To the Bone.
Anorexia is a very significant disorder that needs to be deeply considered and thought out due to the high prevalence rate that it affects. Anorexia is an eating disorder that is characterized by extreme weight loss, usually due to a significant decrease in caloric intake. Anorexia affects all ages, genders, sexual orientations, race, and ethnicity. It is not exclusive to only one type of people. It affects a wide range. Although it affects a wide range of people, females acquire the disorder more often than males, often because of how they portray their body type. Anorexia affects all ages but has a higher prevalence rate in adolescents. Needless to say that it is becoming more prominent in younger children and older adults, due to mostly the perception of how one thinks they look. Many people experience anorexia are less likely to report the disorder due to the negative judgment that society has on this disorder. Today's society has a stereotypical body type, which is females being super skinny. A lot of people try to adapt to the idea of needing to be super skinny to not having any attention or judgment from others. So they resort to losing an extreme amount of weight and sometimes becoming anorexic. The surprising truth. When looking at the evidence, some people may find it surprising that 0.4 to 4% of all Canadian women are diagnosed with anorexia. Also, approximately 40% of all 9-year-old girls have a desire to lose weight. This early mentality can lead to anorexia, due to the mindset of thinking that they need to lose a significant amount of weight in order to be accepted. Anorexia can become a deadly form that about 10% of people living with anorexia die from health-related problems related to the disorder or from suicide. As mentioned earlier, there is a higher prevalence rate in females, with 90% of people being diagnosed with anorexia are females. Needless to say, the male population can still develop anorexia, it's just not as common. Why does anorexia need our attention? Anorexia nervosa is a disorder that needs our attention for many reasons. One of our main concerns is that people are dying from this disorder. Anorexia can be a deadly form due to the lack of nutritional intake one will acquire. If they hit the extremes, one can start to experience organ failure, which can ultimately lead to death. Along with, the person may experience tremendous lows due to the mentality of their body image and the result in suicide. Also, we need to take into consideration that a disorder such as anorexia does run through the family. We need to consider other people who may be affected by the disorder and make sure that they also get the help that they need. Another reason for the attention is that dieting is a very prominent trend in our society today. We need to consider what the appropriate guidelines are for a diet and when it crosses the line to being anorexia. We will talk about the signs and symptoms of the disorder later in the lecture. People have the mental mentality that they have to lose weight and that they are too fat. They are constantly shaming their own body, which leads them to the extremes of limiting their nutritional intake. Lastly, we need to let people who are suffering know that they can get help, and they can get help to understand that it is not something that they should be ashamed of. Anorexia nervosa is a psychological and potentially life-threatening eating disorder in which individuals have an abnormally low body weight, a great fear of gaining weight, and have a body image disturbance. Those suffering from this eating disorder control food and weight, which significantly interfere with their daily lives. They will partake in compulsive rituals that will hinder them from eating, and some will also binge and purge. Here we will discuss the characteristics of anorexia. Anorexia nervosa is characterized by an intense fear of gaining weight even though the individual is already underweight and malnourished. They will also restrict their energy intake, and this is usually done by considerably limiting the amount of food they eat, which results in low body weight in regards to their sex, age, and physical health. They have a disturbed body image, excessive evaluation of their body shape, and refuse to believe the seriousness of their abnormally low body weight. Anorexic individuals tend to be introverted, socially insecure, and reserved. They are highly critical of themselves and are not proud of their abilities even if their school performance is above average. Their entire self-esteem revolves around their body shape and weight. They engage in compulsive and excessive exercise to decrease their body weight. Individuals with anorexia hoard food without actually eating it. There are many symptoms as well as physical, behavioral, and psychological signs associated with anorexia that are due to starvation. It is hard to distinguish the signs and symptoms since low body weight varies for each individual. In addition, some people with anorexia will hide their eating habits, physical issues, and their thinness. Physical symptoms include being unable to maintain a healthy body weight, experiencing fatigue, having low energy, and not sleeping well. Facial changes such as looking pale and sunken eyes, fainting or dizziness, development of food intolerances, loss or irregular periods, and feeling cold due to poor circulation. Psychological signs include extreme dissatisfaction with their body. They may have depression and anxiety, are preoccupied with food, issues with their body weight and shape, food, and difficulty concentrating. Some of the behavioral signs involve an interest in cooking food for others, antisocial behavior, and secrecy around eating. Dieting behaviors such as fasting and avoiding certain foods, and the intentional use of laxatives, diuretics, and appetite suppressants.
In this next section, I will be discussing the root causes of the disorder anorexia nervosa. Considering the complexity of the eating disorders, experts are unsure of the exact causes for this disorder, but could potentially be linked to biological, environmental, and psychological factors. It is unclear as to which biological genes are involved with anorexia nervosa. However, it is quite possible for genetic changes in one's body to increase risk for developing the disorder. Studies have found that an imbalance in brain chemicals, controlling digestion, appetite, and hunger could be a potential cause for this disorder. However, there is still ongoing research in this area of study. Although there are no specific genes found to be linked to anorexia nervosa, there is a prevalence of genetic tendency towards behaviors of being perfect, sensitive about oneself, as well as perseverance, which are traits directly related to anorexia itself. Environmental factors are large contributors to causing this disorder amongst individuals that are from Western societies where thinness is viewed as the finest appearance. In this type of environment, society may measure success and the worth of individuals through their appearance and body figure. Pressures amongst adolescent girls and women may lead to development of this disorder. Portrayals of models in media impose stereotypes in a society where individuals may feel that this is the figure that they need to adopt in order to achieve self-worth. An environmental initiation factor for anorexia nervosa would be professions where specific body figures need to be achieved. These professions include modeling, ballet dancing, as well as sports where overweight or even normal weight athletes may be viewed differently. A repetitive reminder to one's self-image and body figure is typically through a friend or co-worker group. In these environments, both men and women are exposed to criticism over body figure and could potentially lead to anorexia nervosa as well as other eating disorders such as purging or bulimia nervosa. The largest contributing factor in terms of developing anorexia nervosa is a family member who already suffers from the condition within the household. In this way, young adolescents as well as partners living together are exposed to conditions where they may be influenced by certain anorexic behaviors. Environmental factors are thought to be the largest influence from society that contribute to anorexia nervosa. Psychological factors also contribute largely to anorexia nervosa in a number of ways. Many individuals may have obsessive compulsive disorders where they rely on strict diets to maintain a certain body figure, regardless of whether or not it satisfies their hunger. These obsessive compulsive disorders can be a cause for strict dieting and extreme cut down on calorie intake. People may be anxious as to what effect particular food consumption will have on their body figure and therefore restrict eating altogether. Anorexia nervosa is closely related to starving in terms of mood changes due to lack of energy from food consumption. Starvation therefore leads to a significant reduction in appetite, which is directly related to the condition anorexia nervosa. There are also other numerous risk factors for anorexia nervosa. Emotional stress is one of the largest contributors in the case of loss of jobs, moving from one city to another, or the death of a family member. Emotional stressors also include relationship breakups and loss of trust or commitment to friendships. Being pessimistic, doubtful, and having difficulty over stress control can all be risk factors leading up to anorexia nervosa. A lot of these underlying causes and risk factors for anorexia nervosa can be alarming, but also prevented when assessed efficiently.
In addition to the causes of the eating disorder, there are various non-medical therapies and interventions to address anorexia and the associated symptoms. The therapy includes a general team approach that consists of doctors, mental health professionals, and dietitians with specific interest in eating disorders. Possible non-medical treatments and interventions include nutritional counseling, cognitive behavioral therapy, psychotherapy, and family-based therapy that is particularly effective for children. More specifically, we will analyze and discuss the strategic impact of cognitive behavioral therapy, which will be referred to as CBT. There are numerous case reports that demonstrate CBT is an effective method for treating individuals with anorexia. CBT is a type of psychotherapy that primarily focuses on the process of maintenance while changing negative thought patterns about the self. This is also tied to altering unwanted behaviors that may be associated with anorexia. Since weight gain is the primary goal, CBT utilizes specific approaches to address the eating disorder effectively. The process of CBT includes addressing the fear of weight gain, however it should not be overemphasized as it can affect motivation to continue treatment, introducing the concept of self-monitoring, which is important for progression, discussing the cognitive model that includes the concepts of low self-esteem, extreme concerns about shape and weight, and self-induced vomiting, focusing on interpersonal skills and treatment as social deficits are observed in patients with anorexia, integrating family therapy, and increasing the attention of medical risks and the criteria for hospitalization or partial care. The duration of CBT typically lasts for approximately 1 to 2 years. Overall, CBT provides effective education on regular eating patterns, body weight regulation, starvation symptoms, vomiting, and the impact of laxative abuse on the body. The strategic elements of CBT positively influence patients with anorexia. Most importantly, the compliance of therapy and nutritional education is significant for a successful recovery. Bowers and Ansher designed a study to assess changes of 3 elements that consisted of core eating disorder psychopathology, general psychopathology, and depression after inpatient treatment and a 1-year follow-up in patients with anorexia. Specifically, the study investigated the effectiveness of CBT, which had an overall positive influence on patients with anorexia. The authors hypothesized that after discharge, there would be significant changes in the 3 elements for patients with anorexia with the treatment of CBT. The study also analyzed how well the changes were sustained after 1 year. The results were as followed in comparing admission to discharge. The group's mean body mass index increased from 16.7 to 20.5. There was a significant difference in attitude as it was better towards being fat, eating, and being out of control. There was reduced distress on being thin, the significance of being thin, and fewer thoughts about binge eating. Patients experience less confusion in recognizing and responding to emotional states through self-discipline and controlling bodily urges. For example, finding most relationships to be rewarding. Patients also demonstrated fewer obsessive thoughts, anxiety, while being more confident and comfortable with themselves in social situations. Lastly, patients were observed to be less depressed even after the 1-year follow-up. CBT used in the study did not only focus on specific thoughts and cognitive distortions, but on core beliefs by helping patients to express their emotions and understand how to interact with thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. In conclusion, CBT was effective in treating patients with anorexia in the study, but there is a need to evaluate the efficacy of CBT. However, there are some critiques to evaluate the reliability of the study. First, the study used a small sample size which affects the outcome because there is not enough variability for analysis. The study consisted of 32 Caucasian subjects with 29 females and 3 males. In addition, the study primarily analyzes patients admitted for treatment in a naturalistic setting, which results in a possible bias within the patient population. This is because patients are observed in their own environment with little to no interference that was not particularly recorded. Based on the study, we also cannot suggest that the current results can generalize CBT for an outpatient of partial hospitalization. This is because each patient is different with different characteristics and symptoms of anorexia. In addition, CBT of the study is not clearly directed to specific symptoms of anorexia or psychological change, including reduced isolation and increased interpersonal comfort or relationships. Lastly, changes in the 3 elements may not be directly related to CBT. This is because the study demonstrates a change in restoration that can be the result of symptoms of depression as well as change in psychopathology areas, which affects the effectiveness of CBT.
I will be talking about media's portrayal of anorexia nervosa through means of a current and relevant sourced example. In 2017, an American drama film was released worldwide by the ever-popular media portal Netflix. The film, directed by Marty Noxon and starring the American actress, model, and writer Lily Collins, contested in the United States dramatic competition, in which the director spoke passionately upon wanting the film to responsibly serve as a conversation starter about an issue that is too often clouded by secrecy and misconceptions. Well, in fact, the film did exactly that, as controversial debate soon invoked petitions to remove the film from public domain, introduce safe space screenings within treatment centers for participants, and attested caution from mental health professionals. The response was argued to be warranted, as the plot portrays one 20-year-old Caucasian female's experience with chronic anorexia nervosa and the means to afford extensive treatment from an unconventional doctor. The following slide depicts the controversial film's official trailer, and later gaining 5.5 million viewers on YouTube alone.
All right, ready? $2.80 for the pork, $3.50 for the buttered noodles, $1.50 for the roll, and $75 for butter.
It's like you have calorie Asperger's.
That's not breakfast. Neither is coffee.
You do a lot of sit-ups. I'm not going to treat you if you aren't interested in living.
Good speech. I've got it under control.
Isn't it funny? It's a cake.
I've got it under control. I've got it under control.
You okay, honey? I just got up too fast.
So, welcome to our new house member, Ellen.
Hi.
Oh my God.
How do you do it? Eat, I mean.
I'm not gonna lie. I'm really fucking hungry.
Huh? You look like a ghost.
I feel kind of angry. It's my life, too. I don't get to have a sister.
What's going on with you?
I just don't see the point. People say they love you, but what they mean is they love how loving you makes them feel about themselves.
I don't even know where to start with that. There's all kinds of wrong.
The way that you're going, one day you won't wake up.
I can't stop.
Every time you hear that voice, I want you to tell it to fuck off. Fuck off, boys! Somebody tell me why we're here.
Because we're alive.
Very good.
Some of them actually seem like they're doing okay. Like they might get lives and be semi-interesting people.
Did you just say something optimistic?
I did say semi.
In exemplifying the trailer of To the Bone, it is apparent that only certain representations could destigmatize and challenge the associated inaccuracies of anorexia nervosa. In succeeding, I will be discussing specifically the association of the depicted accuracies and the influence on related stigmatization. First, I would like to speak upon the external behaviors depicted in the film. Such behaviors included, but not limited to, calorie counting, dietary restrictions, over-exercising, binging and purging, and chewing and spitting. The great liberties of the external portrayal of anorexia nervosa in the film left viewers with shocking depiction of severe emaciation. Not only did this aspect of the film warrant susceptible individuals at risk of triggering behavior or inspire a competitive desire, it influenced the associated stigma that anorexia nervosa is easily identified externally. In reality, however, the disorder can present in diverse ways, as much of the suffering is internal and is harder to depict in one universal body composition. Secondary to the triggering component was a glamorization of both the individual's experience and recovery process, calling attention to the inaccuracies of both depictions. Within the film, the protagonist and the associated characters met within the treatment center, identifying as young, Caucasian, and affluent class individuals who experience varying degrees of eating disorders. Such portrayal misconstrues the stigma that eating disorders affect only individuals of a specific gender, age, race, ethnicity, body shape and weight, sexual orientation, and socioeconomic status. While, upon study, we know this is far from fact. In relation to such modeled portrayal of individual social determinants is the associated model of recovery through means of treatment. The film, while adequately portraying the protagonist's ambivalence to treatment, implies that recovery is plausible when the protagonist decides she wants to regain her health. This inaccuracy of recovery is quite disturbing, as many individuals with anorexia nervosa has anosognosia, a system that causes patients to deny their disorder and refuse treatment as a result. This glamorized model of choice influences associated stigma, in that eating disorders are a consequence of a deliberate adoption of an extreme diet and vanity, rather than complex origins of biologically influenced and psychologically rooted functioning. In succeeding to the glamorized components was the inaccurate depiction of both a family's dynamic role in disorder diagnosis and disorder recovery. The film depicted the protagonist's family as absent throughout daily living and lacking in supportive nature due to related mental health issues. In relation, insinuation is portrayed upon a family's blame for those who experience anorexia nervosa. The inaccuracies concerning the family's role continue as the treatment center refuses family involvement in the process of recovery due to related absences in sessions and plausibly poor sympathetic influences. The reinforced inaccuracies influences the current stigmatization that families can be agents of anorexia nervosa. Through recent research and advocacy efforts, we know this to be false. In accuracy, anorexia nervosa has an etiology of complex interplay of genetic and environmental factors in which families can act as central advocates in both providers and patient allies of treatment. While exemplifying the film, much critique can be placed in its aspects of inaccuracies and influences in respect to associated stigma. In later, controversial debate asserts to such. However, I do believe the film succeeded in terms of being a means of communication. Beginning a conversation upon a disorder like anorexia nervosa is not simplistic. Caution must be warranted, as many individuals can fall susceptible and vulnerable to the psychological functionings. Yet, a conversation is needed for those who do experience disorder, like symptoms, to receive proper diagnoses and related prognosis of recovery without the associated inaccuracies and stigmatization.
This marks the end of our presentation. We hope you found it interesting and learned something new about anorexia. Thank you for listening.